Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Music Den. I'm Kumerai Fang, and finally we are getting to the worst hit songs of 2018. Now 2018 was a bit of a not great year for me. I felt stuck in pretty much every regard, and towards the end of the year when I was finally starting to get my mojo back, my original software for video editing crashed on me. So I've been stuck learning with this new software, and it's been taking me a lot longer to get to my videos, and I've also run into technical errors along the way just trying to get this hour-long video that I originally had done for you guys, and it's still not done, and I'm tired of waiting to tell you what I think of the year as a whole. Because really, pop music was not good this year. It was the most unpop year that we have on record, actually. I referred to it once as the worst of 2014 mixed with the worst of 2016, but that's because it combined 2016's dull and lifelessness with 2014's what the fuck factor. The former more than the latter, but the results still stand. There was not enough good to counteract the bad, and really, when making this worst list, I had almost twice as many dishonorable mentions as I had actual songs in this ranking. The only reason there aren't as much here is because, well, I made several painful cuts, and even then, there are several honorable mentions that could have easily made it on the list that it was difficult just to cut them out. Before we dive into it, though, let's explain the guidelines for this list. Number 1, touch the Hot 100 anywhere between December of last year and November of this year. Number 2, hit songs from last year can count as hits for this year so long as they were released after July 1st, and so long as I didn't put them on last year's list. And with that, let's get started on the list proper, starting with number 10. So, fun fact, my parents were actually born in the baby boomer generation, and they were actually late starters on having kids. I bring this up because my dad raised us on everything golden age rock and roll, and really would rarely ever go outside that range to get into different music. I remember one exception being a band called Dishonorable with their album Pet Your Friends. His favorite song from that album is Counting Blue Cars, and it's my favorite as well. The concept of the song was handled very well by its music. The concept being the narrator and a child walking together, and at some point the child starts asking questions about God. Interesting thing about this song is that God is referred to as a woman as compared to a man, which shows more curiosity and just overall wonder on this transcendental subject. I of course only bring that up because it's important to point out this song doesn't talk about that.
And I feel it after midnight, a feeling that you can't fight my way.
You know, I never really discussed how I felt about the music video to this song, so here it is. It has a lot of respective pagan imagery, which I do appreciate as a pagan myself. However, it screams more as trying to grab people's attention where the song just can't. Because where the chorus, at first anyways, is sultry and seductive, the verses are slow, drudgy, and I was disengaged the second they came on. Which isn't really something you want for a song about sexual dominance, which requires 3 factors in order to make it work. Attraction, confidence, and control are the names of this game, and there's a severe lack of the first 2 and absolutely none of the third. Ariana is neither cooing or belting on this song, and she is the one begging for sex, which goes against pretty much all the setup that she went through just to go through with this. Particularly at that pre-chorus of hers, which is a cluttery mess, by the way. You cannot tell me that this is anything worth looking into. Especially that delivery, it's just so, I want to say clanky and awkward. However, the worst moment has got to be that final chorus, where all of the elements just come together. That being trap skitters, this drudgy bass that I brought up, and the guitars that are just pushed to the back of the mix. This is arguably one of Ariana's most experimentative songs, and it is bar none, so far anyways, my least favorite. Number 9. So something I see a decent amount of my fellow contemporaries doing is putting a certain song on their best list. Pretty high up on their best list, actually. That song being Lucky You by Eminem featuring Joyner Lucas. Now, ignoring everything that Joyner Lucas has said recently, Eminem has been a bit of a frustrating character until this song. Because his last 2 albums were, quite frankly, difficult to sit through, in my opinion. People could argue that Kamikaze was the worst of the bunch, especially its title track, because why you would sample FAC, I don't know. However, Revival was also a major stinker. Where I wouldn't call this the worst song on it, it lost its good graces with me far too quickly.
Been a liar, been a thief, been a lover, been a cheat. Oh, my sins need
My friend JV from JV Radio Reviews once said that this is just a typical pop crossover, and looking at Eminem's two bigger hits from the last decade, he's not technically wrong there. Enter River to join the collection, featuring Ed Sheeran because Ed Sheeran was popular, so of course he can provide this lovely and emotive hook, and yeah, he does do that. The first time. Because with the hip-hop beat, it takes away from the emotion that's driving the song, that being regret, and only has Ed Sheeran to stand on, which is the same problem Love the Way You Lie had, as well as The Monster. And Slim Shady is a joke here. The tale of regret in a love triangle is actually a very serious topic, but there are so many goofy moments in this song that I can't engage him. I can't take him seriously here. Because she loves danger, psychopath. This love triangle's got us in a rectangle. And of course, one of my personal favorites, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, hey, what can I say? And to that line I say, anything else but that. For this serious of a topic, the subject matter is both taken not seriously enough and way too seriously. Because lines that could have been passable were turned very awkward at moments because most of them could be found towards the build-up to the chorus, and quite frankly, it works against the song's favor. Especially touching back with the beat, which adds a second acoustic guitar. We've got 808s that sound like a train going through a tunnel, and there are also distant effects in the background that are supposed to help portray the story here. Musical elements that feel less out of place and more nauseating as the beat begins to pick up, and placed again with those awkward lines, you've got a mess. As well as a mess of a delivery here, because as it turns out, the hook to the song is supposed to be told in the girl's perspective, and it never, ever sounded that way to me because, you know, Ed Sheeran's on the hook. It sounds incredibly one-sided. The only thing I can take away from this song was one specific lyric. Maybe she'd be my Gwen Stacy to Spider-Man, which for the longest time has always sounded like 'cause Spider-Man. And quite frankly, it was more interesting that way. Number 8. You know, this song probably would have landed as a dishonorable mention if not for one specific part. But oh, what a part it was.
I woke up in Chris Brown's body. So hot as shit.
And before you ask, yes, I am referring to the Kendall Jenner part. That is unnerving, it is invasive, and incredibly creepy to me. If only because I can imagine no experienced dickie poking Kendall Jenner in a spot that when she gets back into her body is going to hurt like blazes. Though that's not to ignore the fact that this song is just incredibly not funny. Because yes, this is a comedy song, only it's a comedy song that just doesn't have a punchline to it, and doesn't really make any sense without the music video. And even then, it still doesn't make any sense, because I'm struggling to find where the joke is. Is it Dickie saying the N-bomb ad nauseum because he swapped bodies with Chris Brown? Is it when Dickie goes into Ed Sheeran's body saying it's not as fun to be him as it is to be Chris Brown? Or is it Chris's realization in Dickie's body that no one's judging him for his quote-unquote controversial past? And yes, I did cringe at that part. As you can see, I'm grabbing at straws trying to talk about this because, again, this would have been a dishonorable mention if not for Kendall Jenner's part. Plus, I will admit that Khaled's part is admittedly somewhat funny. It did get me to chuckle. And on an end note, even though 2018 was a very difficult year for me to put out content, I can take solace in the fact that I never had to talk about this. Number 7! 2018 was a bad year on multiple accounts, but another reason it was so bad was because I had a series of round 2s. The reason being that I would repeat several of the same things I said on the previous 2 year-end lists I did, if not for the fact I already said them. I could easily apply some of those things here. And where this song is certainly not the worst example, it is also the best and by far most appropriate one I could think of. How fitting that it's back in the same spot.
You stick out of the crowd, baby, it's a no-brainer. It ain't that hard to choose. Him or me, be for real, baby, it's a no-brainer.
And I thought that mewling baby was annoying. Here it's just grown a year older and it started to learn other sounds. Quavo is delivering bars that I swear a 5-year-old could write. Chance the Rapper is somehow even more annoying than he was last time through, with a line that's referencing a woman saying that she's trying to choose between him, Quavo, Justin, and Assad, who is DJ Khaled's son. Yeah, that's not cringy at all. Justin Bieber's hook is a mild irritation to me, but then his verse comes on, which sounds like he's struggling with an oral language exam. Like, seriously, it gets stilted and awkward at times. The only one missing to make the song any worse is Lil Wayne. And quite frankly, I'm happy they left him behind. Ugh. Number 6. Correct me if I'm wrong, but with the exception of the Radical Douche, the song has made every critic's worst list so far. Not surprised by it. Oh yay, the rip-off to Gucci Gang that no one wanted. Dropped 4 to 6 semitones just so that way people wouldn't recognize it. You clever little devils, you. This song only got popular because of Drake, and same thing can be said about Lil Baby. Without that push from him, no one would know who this guy is. For the longest time, the only line from the song that I even knew was wham 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 bitch I'm Lil Baby, and I think that just tells you how poorly written everything is. And Drake starts off the song with a line like, your dad's a something or other. I don't know, they're both mumbling their way through this. There's also apparently this Pikachu reference that I didn't even know was there for months on end. Now I may love and support Pikachu, but I don't support you ripping off your mentor, Lil Baby, because yes, Young Thug is teaching this guy, which is kind of odd giving his delivery. I would barely call it rapping, but I also wouldn't call it singing. And I would argue that given the right circumstances, Young Thug at least has a personality behind him. Both this and Drip Too Hard are both amateurish songs in my eyes, and I hope Lil Baby is forgotten almost as quickly as he came to the spotlight. As for Drake, well, I'll get to him later. Let's go with that. Number 5! Of all the second rounds, this is the one that feels the least worthy of it. Mainly because, well, it almost completely doesn't fit. However, if there is one thing I do not approve of, it's manipulation, especially when it's under the guise of a very serious topic. It's the reason I can be thankful to 1-800 for at least trying to be sincere for its audience, and if you got solace out of it, that's great. But you can't tell me to defend this. I refuse.
Someone that's afraid to let go. You decide if you're ever gonna let me know. Yeah, suicide.
Because yes, that suicide line is as toxic as everyone says it is. Now, before we get too far into this, I will say this. XXXTentacion did not deserve to die the way he did, and apparently he was starting to change at some point before he died. Or at least trying to. That's the public record that I've gathered. However, before we got to that point, he released Question Mark, which is where the song comes from. So it doesn't really surprise me that the lead single for that album is actually incredibly toxic, and reflected the toxicity that X had been portraying to the world at that time. Not gonna go directly into his alleged criminal actions because, well, the man's dead, so there's really no point. I will say this regarding the song's content. The best argument you could make for it is that X is simply projecting how he feels about his previous ex towards his new girlfriend. An argument that could be better made if there were more verses, or if the first verse was at least expanded more upon. Except we don't get that. It's basically the hook, I believe it's 4 or 5 times over throughout this song, and the one verse this song has is only 4 bars. I'm sorry, there's really not much room for argument in this case. However, what probably pissed me off the most about this song, aside from what I just brought up, is the instrumentation before the final hook, where we get this computerized sample of Asian drums and, I think, a shamisen, don't quote me on it, which didn't sound all too great in my opinion, but could have been used to build the song up to, you know, a much stronger chorus, or at least a more interesting one than just going with the same beat that ran throughout the song. Something that would have made the music interesting, but in this case just makes it kind of annoying. Because that trap beat really wasn't anything worth noting until that came up. Just saying. Number 4! You know, I think I'm starting to feel bad for Nicki Minaj.
She got that wet, got that drip, got that super soak. I hit that, she a FEFE, honey, Kiki, she eat my dick.
And yes, I do legitimately mean that. Nicki said a lot of stuff to bring a lot of hate onto herself this past year, and quite frankly, she did deserve it. Her album Queen was just a terrible album in general, 2 out of 10 at best, and not even a listen that I could finish. However, I did like some of the cuts from it, including Chun-Li, which was supposed to be the big single. But then we get to this song, which, unless Good Form with Lil Wayne becomes a hit, is going to be her final nail in the coffin. She's basically relying on 6ix9ine for some form of relevance. She's not really trying. The verse took her 15 minutes to write, which, Yeah, no shock there. However, she's the only thing that gives the song anything worth of interest, because she does try to change things up and get off of this drudgy, slow, and tedious rhythm that she's got going on with her flow, which is the same rhythm of the beat as well as 6ix9ine's rapping for that matter, and oi! Let's get a few things out of the way. First and foremost, the previous worst list I did, I actually misread some of the lyrics. I thought the super soaker he was referring to was actually his dick, which would have made a lot more sense because in hindsight, it's actually supposed to be this girl's vagina. I'm sorry, just... what? It makes references to the criminal charge of using a 13-year-old in one of his music videos in a very sexual manner. A very bad move because he's now going to jail. He puts in an eeny, meeny, miny, mo line, which not only references a bad pop song, but also is incredibly childish, which, again, going back to that whole 13-year-old thing, eek. He says he doesn't want any friends, which I call bullshit on his bullshit for that one. And as if that all weren't bad enough, he has a line that says, and I quote, "Talk to her nice so she won't fight back." That alone probably would have spiked this song up to number 2, if not for the fact, I want 6ix9ine to be forgotten. And of a top 5 worthy entry that needs to be forgotten, this is the spot it goes. Always. Number 3. Are you really surprised? 7 minutes. That's what this is. A 7-minute long posse cut of a genre referred to as reggaeton trap with toxic masculinity from all 6 of our performers, who each have their own hook and verse, and dear God! Each one sounds like they're in competition on just how much worse they can sound than the other. Ozuna is arguably the best part about this song because, well, at least he's trying. Not only is he trying, but he also doesn't have as much toxicity around him that the other 5 do. And then you got people like Darrell and Casper, and let me put it for you like this. If I believed in the Christian hell, I would believe that both of those voices would come out of it. And going back to the topic of toxicity, that's exactly what this song is. Because Te Bote translates to English as I dumped you, but not in the traditional sense of I dump you, but more I threw you out, like garbage. And the amusing part is, no one in this song got the memo on what it was actually about, because all 6 of them go about it a different way. They can't stay consistent on how bad they sound, or with what they're even saying. Oh, and you remember the trend of round 2s? Yeah, that's here too, because the beat is from Unforgettable, and it's dropped 4 to 6 semitones. Because here's the thing, where the beat is practically the same here, Sway Lee and French Montana moved the song along to where it flowed like, you know, a song. There were defined moments of a verse and a hook. Here, nothing changes, nothing is interesting, nothing goes up or down, or even makes the song move. Which makes these 7 minutes even harder to sit through. The only real good thing you could say about it is that the original Te Bote was 4 minutes and 40 seconds with only 3 performers on it. So they basically only added on 2 minutes and 20 seconds with adding on 3 other guys. Aside from that though, nothing worth remembering from this. It'll be forgotten in a year or 2. Number 2. You recall when I said that I'd be talking about Drake later? Yeah, later is now. And all I really got to say to that is... seriously? Again?
I'm upset. 50,000 on my head is disrespect. So offended that I had to double check.
I didn't think we'd get another 2016 moment like this, but hey, it happened. Because Drake, even with Nice for What, released an atrocity of an album. I could easily put all the songs from said album on this list and call it a day because, well, it's in general. However, I've cherry-picked them because, quite frankly, these are the 4 that I noticed. Those 4 being God's Plan, I'm Upset, Nonstop, and In My Feelings. And I know what I said about God's Plan. It's a mediocre song at best, and it is. But here's the thing. Drake managed to do something to me that I didn't think he could ever do. Disappoint me. Because God's Plan was a real set standard. Nice for What was a breath of fresh air, which I didn't expect, so it looked like his music was on a bit of a stepping ladder, and that God's Plan was the lowest he was ever going to go. Then Scorpion dropped, and it ruined everything. And let's just go through it. In My Feelings made it up here for replacing Nice for What, because just the reminder that we've gone back down the rabbit hole is just annoying to me. You've got Nonstop, which was supposed to be a non-album single, that was not worth talking about. Like, why? This is one of the worst songs on the album, not to mention the worst way to start your album. And seriously, if this song doesn't make Ducky's committee video, then I'm going to lose faith in humanity. Because it is whiny, it is bitchy, it's pretty much everything that people didn't like about Fake Love, but just boiled down to its barest essence, and including some references to his avoiding paying child support. Great. Ripping off the beat to 21 Savage's bank account wasn't a step up either. I can't hate these songs enough as a whole to give them their own separate ranks, so that's the reason Drake is spared from being number one. But even then, there's still a song that I find that's worse. But before that, time for some dishonorable mentions and runner-ups. I think I officially understand why people didn't like Thinking Out Loud back when it was a big hit. Because for the longest time, this song just would not die. Not to mention the fact it cock-blocked Finesse from reaching any higher than number 3. Great.
I still see your shadows in my room.
This song is a guy in middle school getting dumped for the first time, and the guy who wrote it is getting sued for copyright infringement. Good.
You're such a fucking hoe. I love it.
This song went from weirdly bad to being just depressing. One of my favorite YouTube critics hopped on the Roblox memes that came with this song, and it was the worst moment ever.
This is America.
I know I'm a dumb white girl from suburbia, but if you're gonna talk about racism, I would appreciate it if you at least said something about it. Also, this song has the same problem as Freaky Friday, that being you need the music video for context. Especially since the radio will not play the gunshots that separate the main song from the gospel parts. Also, that outro that's trying to be creepy and unnerving is one of my least moments in pop music this year.
Motorsport, put that thing in sports.
The girls are trying very hard here, while the beat and the guys are just not.
901 Shelby Drive, look alive.
Drake, again.
Walk it like I talk it. Walk it like I talk it. Walk it.
Migos and Drake? Oh boy, I hit the lottery. This is a goldmine of people bragging when they have no right to. Especially with a beat that does nothing. You know, it took me a while to understand what bothered me about this, but one day, while listening to the drop, it finally hit me. Nothing comes in at the right time. All of the instruments are just delayed a couple seconds and do not come in at the right time. It makes everything sound offbeat, if that makes any sense. And before we get to number 1, let's tackle those painful cuts real quickly. Numbers 15 through 11.
Cause girls like you run around with guys like me to sundown.
You know, in trying to come up with something new to say about this song, I realized that there really wasn't anything new to say. Which really says more about the song itself than anything I could say about it. It's a boring nothing that had no right to go to number 1. What else is there to say?
If it's meant to be, it'll be, it'll be.
This made it here on principle alone. I may not be a fan of country music, but I know what it sounds like. And this ain't it. And yet, it's the biggest country hit of all time? The fuck?
Niggas envy, Blicky got the stiffy, got Blicky,
You know, I just realized that I never said what made 6ix9ine even remotely appealing. Well, here it is, yelling while rapping. Much like the crunk scene back in the 2000s, only with boring trap music behind him, and absolutely nothing to add. Subtract that from the equation, and he turns into every other SoundCloud rapper that you've ever heard. If I actually got bombarded with this song as opposed to FEFE, it might have actually made the list.
Look at me with that look in your eye.
I'll say this, if you have to tell a guy repeatedly that you don't want to get with him, then 1, he clearly doesn't care about how you feel, and 2, he's clearly taking advantage of the fact that you still want to have some form of a relationship with him, even if it's not a romantic one. So he's wearing you down just to try and win you over. In other words, cut the cord with a guy. It ain't worth it.
She can get a taste.
The only good thing I can say about this song is that it's not the follow-up, which sampled Play by Daniel Banner. And if you don't know what that song is, count your blessings. Don't look it up. It's not worth it. Alright, here we go. We're finally here. Number 1. You know, the worst anyone has ever told me about my worst hit of a given year is that they don't think the song is bad enough to warrant the number 1 spot, but they at least agree that the song is garbage. This time, my number one is probably the most divisive thing I've ever come up with. Because so many people refer to this song as great, refreshing, and a highlight of not just the project it came off of, but just of what could have come out in 2018. But here it is, top of the worst list. The real sad part about this song is every fiber in my being, since its release, told me that I should never listen to it, and that's precisely what I did until October, when it finally made it into the top 30. And like with Look What You Made Me Do last year, one listen was all it took. I found my worst hit of the year. I especially found it because, due to its release date, I can't have it qualify in the 2019 year-end list. Because, here's the thing, if someone manages to disappoint me, then there's a very good chance that they're going to end up on my worst list, but the feeling is so much worse when someone you love does it. And it's especially bad when that person is someone from your childhood. And since I made it extremely obvious who the hell I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen, Panic at the Disco.
Had to have high hopes for a living, shooting for the stars when I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a doubt.
Never have I wanted a song to be eviscerated so quickly, and never have I not wanted to do it. A Fever You Can't Sweat Out was a good start to their music career. Pretty Odd was actually amazing. But then we reach into the point where Panic members start leaving the group, such as with Vices and Virtues. And the band starts to go under this severe identity crisis, releasing not so great material, but not so bad either. Following that up was Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die, or as I like to call it, The Bottom of the Barrel. A pop album that experiments in so many different ways that it just doesn't know what it's doing, and the cuts just hurt to me. A similar thing can be said for Death of a Bachelor, no matter how much I actually enjoyed it. Here we finally have an established sound, that being a whole lot of bombast, courtesy of Emperor's New Clothes, Victorious, Don't Threaten Me with a Good Time. A tone that was continued onto their more minor hit from this year, Say Amen Saturday Night, a song that I actually like. But then High Hopes came along, and I despise it with a burning passion. The verses are okay, the pre-chorus is actually pretty decent, has some nice build-up and swell to it. But oh god, that chorus! Trap skitters, actual drums, programmed drums, and horns. These are the instruments I notice in this, and they're all at the front of the mix with Brendan Urie's vocals. And they hurt. It's mixed like a fucking AJR song, and no, I'm not taking that back. Forget bombastic, this is just loud. This is made particularly worse because the song doesn't have a bass. Nothing feels like it's playing to even the right beat. It doesn't match with what the song is apparently going for. Which seems to be a mixture of reflecting back on how Brendan Urie gained his success with all the bragging that you hear on Death of a Bachelor. Yes, you had to have high hopes to get to where you are now, writing like you're Lucas fucking Graham, only with a smidge more of personality. And well, there you have it. High Hopes by Panic at the Disco, my worst hit of 2018. Thank you guys for watching. I'm sorry this took so long, but I hope to see you around on the best hit songs of 2018. And with that out of the way, signing off the Music Den, I'm Kumerai Fang, off to hunt my next prey.
I never said that this would be easy.